Hi there, my name is Isaac. I'm the co-founder of RNKR and the lead developer. Today I'm going to give you a quick introduction of RNKR and what are we all about. So RNKR is a marketplace for financial analysis. That means that RNKR by itself is not an application to perform financial analysis. Instead, we're a platform where other developers and content creators can push financial analysis studies for investors to consume. You can think of it in a very high level as a Bloomberg terminal where the functions of this terminal are coded by multiple developers. And of course, right now we don't have nearly as many functions because we're just starting. But ideally, that's the overall goal that we're trying to achieve, is to be an open financial analysis marketplace. So let's go ahead and log into the platform. Putting my username and password. And as you can see, the first screen you're presented is what we call a dashboard. A dashboard by default is empty and allows you to analyze a specific security. And each widget of the dashboard has to be purchased from the marketplace. Some widgets are free, so of course the user doesn't have to pay for anything, but others cost a specific amount of money. And the developer essentially can choose how much to charge for each widget. So let's go ahead and visit the marketplace and let's purchase a few widgets. So let's say we're interested in taking a look at a fundamental overview of the underlying. Let's go ahead and click. Since this widget was free, we were not required to pay anything. So that's why just clicking the add button automatically adds it to your dashboard. Here, we're quickly viewing Apple's position against the sector in the industry across several fundamental indicators. For example, Apple seems to be valued about the same as the remaining of the sector in the industry. However, the debt and the net income, for example, are substantially higher. And same, for example, on the return on assets. If you want to learn more about a specific widget, you can just go ahead and click this information. If you're unhappy with the widget, you can just go ahead and delete it. So let's add a few more widgets to this platform. Let's take a look at the historical cash flow of Apple. So we've seen the free cash flow of Apple has increased year over year. And in September 2015, it reached $70 billion. That's what we're analyzing since 2010. The same way we analyze Apple here, we can just go ahead and, for example, type IBM. And that quickly brings the same dashboard, but now with the data for Apple. Quite a different story between IBM and Apple. It's important to notice that these widgets, or ideally what we call them apps within RNKR, has been developed essentially by a different developer. So the platform itself does not care about what this widget is. Actually, it doesn't even know what the code does. It just knows how to display and render those things and execute them as needed. So we can also create new dashboards. Say, for example, you're interested in, you want to separate your technical widgets from your fundamental. So let's create a dashboard called technical. Let's then go again to the marketplace. And let's take, for example, a candlestick widget. This widget is a monster of data, right? It's essentially going years in the chart patterns, identifying specific patterns and identifying what happens within the next bar and the next 5 bars after a pattern has occurred. So for example, if you spot a 3 crows pattern in Apple, the next 5 bars, on average, the cumulative return is about negative 0.6%. The same way you were able to do that for Apple, if you type IBM, the same study shows up for IBM. And the numbers are a little bit different. So that's a little bit of how widgets and the dashboard works. Another way you can interact with dashboards and widgets is through a concept called exposés. You can think of an exposé as a hard-coded dashboard, right? It's essentially a dashboard that highlights a specific topic. So say, for example, here we're highlighting the topics of macroeconomics indicators. So you can take a look, for example, the personal savings rate, the Shiller P ratio, the median home sales, which seems to be peaking already what it was in 2006, the financial stress index, and etc. So it's a very useful tool to explore a specific topic. So usually those widgets are not necessarily tied to a specific security, right? So here we're analyzing something that is overall. It's not necessarily just across a specific security. Now that we introduced the concept of exposés, dashboards, and widgets, we can also see another way to interact with applications within Ranker. In particular, we're going to be using the actual apps. To interact with apps, you have to click on the console button. When you enter the console page, the first thing you notice is that it actually is rendering the available applications that you can use on this account. So for example, we can see that we have an app that does correlation, another app that gives me the current news, apps that optimizes a portfolio, and one that does spread analysis. Again, these apps have been published to the platform. They are not part of Ranker, really. They are just an app that has been developed for Ranker and it is published within Ranker. So I prepared a few examples here. For example, let's take a look at correlation. To invoke an app, you type the mnemonic of the app and then the parameters that the app is expecting. For example, the correlation, it expects several assets and optionally a date also. So here we are analyzing the correlation across several assets. For example, taking a look at the financial market, we're taking a look at the utilities, consumer staples, S&P 500, the treasury bonds, and gold and real estate. You can visually see that gold and the treasury bonds are somewhat negative correlated, or not as lot negative correlated or uncorrelated to a lot of the assets, which is something that you would expect. But here you can actually visually see. So let's take a look at a different example and use the spread analysis function. And we're going to analyze the spread between the gold and the treasury bonds since 2005. This is very common when you're doing pair trading. So here you have your 2-time series and we're analyzing the difference between the 2-time series. We also have a histogram that plots the values where the spread has been over time. And we actually plot also the actual spread. And on the right hand side here you have key stats about the spread. So for example, we know that the median difference between the gold and the treasury bond from the time series is about 16. The average is 18 and currently is actually negative 10. And the standard deviation is about 25.78. The minimum has been negative 22, which was back in 2015 to 2005, and the maximum actually has been around really September 2011, right? Or in August, September 2011. So that's the spread analysis function, and the same way that the other apps have been published to Ranker, so did this one. Let's take a look at the last one here, portfolio optimization, Sharpie portfolio optimization. So the portfolio optimization is giving a list of symbols and then a time frame, and then it optimizes the portfolio from maximum Sharpie ratio. It also optionally plots the efficient frontier, the market bits bullet, and also gives you the distribution that maximizes the Sharpie ratio. So we can see that we should have invested 45% on Coca-Cola, 22% on Microsoft, and 32% on Apple in order to maximize the Sharpie ratio. But as you can see, if you're willing to accept higher deviations from the mean return, then you probably should have put 100% on Apple, right? That's what the efficient frontier was highlighting. So that's the example of 3 applications in Ranker. And now we're going to take a look at how these applications actually make their way into Ranker. How can a developer publish an application to Ranker? To get started with publishing an app to Ranker, you first must obtain your Ranker token. To do so, you just go to the website and click on Profile. Within the profile, click on the Edit button and go to your Security tab. Inside the Security tab, you'll notice there's a very unique number. This number is what uniquely allows you to actually publish an application to Ranker. So let's go ahead and create an application for Ranker. The application we're going to be doing is very simple. We are going to be creating an application that creates a normal distribution and then allows you to customize the mean, the standard deviation, and the number of samples. So let's go ahead and open our terminal, and let's use RNKR app Python create. So that's going to scaffold an application in Python, specifically the application that I just mentioned. Let's give it a name called sample, and let's pass our token. Notice that what this is actually going to do right now is setting up a bunch of the requirements for us to deploy the applications to RNKR, and is going to create a folder with the sample code for us. Notice that I'm doing this actually live right now, and this is actually hitting the main website. And just to show so, when we click ls here, there is no function yet called sample. It's being created right now. So let's analyze actually what RNKR creates for us. So if we open a text editor, you see there are several files created. First, let's take a look at the application itself. It's very simple. It's about 30 lines of code, and it does very little, but it does so in a very cool fashion. So, for example, the most important part of this function is the execute, right? It means that whenever somebody at RNKR types the command sample, it's going to call this little method here. And this method, as you can see, expects 3 parameters, right? Mu, sigma, and samples. Mu is our mean, what do we expect to be the mean of our distribution. Sigma is the standard deviation, and samples is the number of samples we would like to draw from this distribution. And then the result is a histogram. Notice that we don't have to necessarily plot anything. We just have to tell RNKR, hey, we want to plot a histogram. And we want the title to be this, the subtitle to be this, the dimension we wanted to span across 12 columns. And these are the values that we're drawing from our distribution. So, and then for example, we just tell RNKR to render the application itself. So that's all the application is doing. Another file that is important to pay attention to is the configuration file. This is where you're teaching RNKR what your application is all about. So for example, we're saying that this application is under the fundamental category. This is the description. This is the example. This is the name, like the actual command that we're going to be typing. The parameters that this application support. So for example, we support mu. It's supposed to be a numeric type, and by default the number is 0. Right? We support a sigma, and by default is 0.1. The price, how much we want to charge for this application. So for now, this application is free because the price is at $0. The shortcut of the application. The shortcut is, for example, when the user types the name of your application, in which order are the parameters that he needs to type. So for example, in this one I specified that the order should be sample, and then comes the mean, then comes the sigma, and then comes the number of samples that you want to take. If you omit a specific parameter, of course we use the default. And we have some other stuff, like for example the short description and whatnot. So this is the scaffold. Every time you create a sample application in RNKR, you start with a very basic application that outputs this histogram. Let's go ahead and deploy this application to RNKR. Let's go ahead and say deploy. So what this code is doing is actually performing a cross compilation. So your code works on RNKR's platform. In other words, we need to make sure that even though your code was developed for OS X, which is what I'm using here, it is actually going to work just fine on RNKR's platform, which happens to be running on Linux. And that's usually not a problem if you're using, for example, languages like Python. But the problem is, a lot of the times, the financial tools depend on numerical analysis libraries. And a lot of the time, those libraries, for performance reasons, are actually compiled for a specific platform. So that's why we're performing this step. And it's going to take a few minutes for it to be done. Once it's done, we'll continue. As you can see, the compilation is just about getting done. We are creating now the final version of the application that is going to make its way to RNKR. We're uploading it to RNKR, and we're creating essentially all the requirements to publish this application on RNKR. So let's go ahead. Looks like everything is good. Let's go ahead and go back to the website. And then now let's type the command ls again. notice that a new application showed up. And this is the new application that we actually just coded. Let's give it a shot. Let's type sample. There we said that it was going to be the means, right, the mu. So we want the mean to be 0. We want the standard deviation to be 0.1, and we want to take 1,000 samples. Let's execute this, and there it is. We have our application that was just created live on the website. This is live, and it does exactly that. Let's try, for example, to put 5,000 samples. So of course it takes a little bit longer, but there it is, 5,000 samples. Let's change the mean to be 3.0. We expected now the mean to be 3.0. Let's change the standard deviation. Let's put the standard deviation at 1.0. Notice now it's not anymore as we expected. It seems to be a little bit fatter here than before. Let's draw more samples, 10,000 samples. Notice that the developer, in this case it was us, we didn't really care about outputting those things. We just told RNKR we needed a histogram, and a histogram appeared. And we also provide for the developers the execution, and also we also perform the caching. So say for example we type this command again, the answer is almost instantaneously because we actually didn't have to recalculate it again. If you go back to our configuration file, we told RNKR that it can actually cache these things for this amount of time, right, for this amount of seconds. So that was how the applications essentially make its way to RNKR. And I hope you enjoyed it. This highlights the extensibility of this platform. There is nothing like it in the market right now. It is not a financial project per se. It's a financial platform. You can, with enough developers contributing to it, this can grow substantially faster than any other financial platform out there. And RNKR itself is absolutely free. The developers choose what they want to charge for the applications. So that was it. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for your